Fewer jobs being created as more Americans drop out of the workforce. The disappointing jobs report coming as Republican presidential candidates keep pushing tax cut plans. They say that's the answer. Are they right or wrong? Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Buttner. This is Bulls and Bears. And here they are, the Bulls and Bears this week. Gary B. Smith, Jonas Ferris, John Layfield, along with Susie Welch and Emily Tish Sussman. Welcome to everybody. Okay, Gary B., are tax cuts the best way to spur job growth?
I think they are, Brenda. Look, there's research comes out every day. The most latest from the National Bureau of Economic Research said that there was a positive correlation between tax cuts and job growth. But even if we look back at real-life examples, every major economic expansion we've had for the last 50 years has been spurred by tax cuts. Kennedy in the 60s, Reagan in the 80s, Clinton in the 90s, that economy took off when he lowered the capital gains tax. Each of those saw robust growth in jobs. I think the evidence is very clear. I don't know why you wouldn't cut taxes.
Well, Emily, you have a different view.
Absolutely. First of all, I think we should put the jobs numbers that came out today in perspective. Yes, they may be lower than many had hoped, but we are still in our 69th straight month of private sector job growth. So I think there should be a little bit of perspective on that. But as to the GOP plans moving forward, they are definitely catching on to something of this populist messaging, this populist sense in America today. And so they're throwing a little bit of a bone towards almost symbolic, really, in tax cuts towards the middle class. But when we look at their jobs proposals, as their tax proposals as a whole, what they're primarily doing is continuing to benefit those at the top, hoping it does trickle down. I just don't know that the regular Americans are really going to buy it. They want to see solid programs that help them.
Well, John, we know that the top percent also pays like 30% of all federal tax revenues. So is that true? There's no trickle down?
No, there is a trickle down, and I agree with Gary B. in principle. Gary B., the problem with you is you have common sense. Just like Susie, you'll never make it in Washington, D.C. because those guys do not. Look, the bigger numbers here are 6.5 years of a deficit that is almost doubled. Now, we've tried it both ways, guys. So we cut taxes under President Bush, the deficit almost doubled. We raised taxes under President Obama, the deficit is almost going to double. You look at President Obama's budget, increases the deficit $8 trillion over the next 10 years. All of these Republicans, none of them are balancing the budget. They're all roughly the same. No one has any fiscal responsibility. It's not about cutting taxes. It's not about raising taxes. We got to balance the budget, and we need major reform to major issues. And the fact that we don't have a president that can get along with the Congress for the last 20 years is the biggest problem in our country.
Well, Susie, Emily was talking about how we have to put this into perspective, the jobs report. We know that wage growth is stuck. We're seeing people drop out of the workforce, and we're seeing fewer and fewer jobs being created as we go along.
Right. I mean, it's all in. I mean, there's a lot of different problems all happening at once. And tax cuts are one way to galvanize the economy. But there's other ways. You know, in the past couple of years, there's just been this gigantic apparatus that has been erected that intervenes with the free market. There's 21 federal agencies and 15 federal departments that basically watch the free markets. Some of that apparatus has to come apart and has to come down so that we can get this economy going again and have job growth. Otherwise, we're just looking at a long-term picture that's really dire. I mean, 50% of the people in the country underemployed or unemployed.
Jonas, can we afford tax cuts, to John's point?
That's really the, look, you can create jobs a lot of ways. They're all smart, and the government could do what Oprah did and give everybody in America a free car. That would cause a lot of jobs. You have to make all those cars. It'd be great for the economy. But at the end of the day, how are you going to pay for those cars? And it's the same thing with a tax cut. There's no plans from anybody to cover the cost of these radical tax cuts they want to do, which sound great. So the best we could get at this point, since no one's going to cut anything, is tax simplification, which could have some benefits to the job market. That's feasible because it's revenue neutral. You're just going to remove deductions, lower whatever it is to make that happen would be a goal that we could actually work towards. Because across the board tax cuts to every bracket is not going to happen because we're already running a deficit in the strongest economy we've had in many years.
Gary B., well, let's talk about that strong economy. How worried are you about this latest jobs report?
Well, very worried, but the one thing I'm not worried about is the Fed raising rates. I don't think they're going to raise until maybe the first quarter of 2016. Look, the only reason they would or should raise rates, other than some moral imperative that people think that they just should buckle down and tighten our belt, is if we saw inflation, which we haven't, or the economy was overheating. Instead, Brenda, it's going the opposite way. We just saw the manufacturing reports earlier this week, negative across the board. We alluded to the labor force participation rate at, what is it, at a 38-year low. Housing is declining. Wages were down. And this is an economy closer to a recession than it is to overheating. I don't think the Fed's going to do anything. I'm worried about the economy.
Emily?
Sure. Well, if we want to talk about the long term, what any of these GOP candidates is proposing, these proposals are hugely expensive. So then you start to wonder about, where does it come from? Does it either come from just increasing the deficit, or does it come from cutting to the serious programs where we do have the primary bulk of our spending, but that is the actual security for people? Talking about wages going up, people need to have a brink of security and not being concerned about falling off the edge all the time. So they're going to go for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Is that where they're going to look to balance these? Or is it just going to be a big, massive deficit increase? Well,
John, I mean, entitlements, that is where we have to cut in order to get this budget in balance.
Yeah, we have to. And look, if they come up with a plan on that, that's a plan that obviously the Democrats don't have. The one thing that Emily is half right about is Republicans don't have a realistic plan. The one thing she's half wrong about is the Democrats do. They don't. No one of these guys do. You have a team that's losing. And what do? Do you keep the coach that's giving you this 0-16 record with the same players and just magically hope that, hey, guys, this is going to be our season? We've been 0-16 for 8 straight years, but we're going to come around this year. It's not going to happen. All of these guys are the same. None of them talk about balancing the budget. None of them talk about actually working with their Congress. That hasn't happened in 20 years. None of these guys have a realistic plan. It does not look very dim when you look at these GOP candidates and these Democratic candidates.
Well, John actually played for the NFL, so he can talk about teams. Susie, what do you say?
I'm just afraid when I'm listening to everyone talk that we're, me included, talking about pulling the same levers, the debt, the deficit, the taxes, and so forth. Looking long term, and you look at the really big economic trends like automation and robotics, we're talking about a gigantic shift in what kind of jobs actually exist. And the only way out of that really is innovation. We need more Ubers and Twitters and Amazons. We need a big kind of change in our mindset about what are the levers that are really going to work to change the trajectory of the way the economy is going.
Jonas, that is one important part of job growth, but it's longer term.
I'd argue it's also causing the low unemployment. The low job creation numbers right now are because those companies are putting people out of work more than that. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's good for the economy in the long run, but there is an issue where a lot of people had jobs that, like the taxi dispatchers, that job is going away because of Uber. They're still drivers, but there's going to be less of that. So I don't know what the government's plan is to deal with the amount of people that aren't going to get jobs. And it's one of the reasons the labor force participation rate is so bad. It's not all bad policy. It is innovation. It's a good side and a bad side to that.
Okay, Gary B., I want to give you the last word on this.
I think Susie made some good points. I would argue just a little bit in that a lot of the innovation in our country has been spurred by people, quite frankly, wanting to become filthy rich. You become filthy rich when you don't pay a lot of taxes to the government. So these absurd policies that Bernie Sanders has of like 92% tax rate, something silly like that, you want to kill the future Googles and Apples and Microsofts of the world? Let's have those tax rates.
Okay, great debate, guys. Thanks.